Tim Cook took the reins at Apple in 2011 when the late Steve Jobs nominated Cook his successor. And within just 7 short years, Apple became the first trillion-dollar company in America. And while the world was just wrapping their head around that, under Tim Cook, Apple had already tripled its market cap to become the first $3 trillion company the world has ever seen. So, let's look into Tim Cook's incredible rise to the pinnacle of the corporate world. Cook is an exceptional guy, no doubt, but his upbringing was anything but that. He was born into a working-class family in Alabama. Cook's father was a humble shipyard worker, while his mother worked at a local pharmacy. Needless to say, Cook's family wasn't rich, and he remembers he couldn't afford a new typewriter when he was growing up. Despite the lacking resources, Cook was a stellar student in his public high school. He became a member of the National Honor Society and later went on to attend Auburn University in Alabama. By 1982, he graduated from Auburn with a Bachelor of Science degree majoring in industrial engineering. And shortly after graduation, Cook was hired at IBM to join their personal computer business. At the time, computers still looked like this, and the computer industry was still rapidly evolving. There was a lot of room for innovation and growth, especially for a dedicated young man like Cook. Over the years, Cook proved himself at IBM as he quickly climbed the corporate ladder. From the start, he was an inventory management genius. Cook's core philosophy has always been that inventory is evil. No matter how secure a company may feel by having parts at hand, it's essential for a business to minimize the inventory. Cook managed to lower inventory without any drawbacks thanks to his expert implementation of the just-in-time manufacturing process, which saves a lot of money on storage costs and wasted parts. IBM saw potential in Cook, so much so that they put him in an exclusive educational program that taught all the cutting-edge theory of manufacturing and distribution. On this path, Cook enrolled in Duke University, eventually getting an MBA by 1988. IBM then appointed Cook in a top-notch role as the Director of North American Fulfillment. Finally, after spending 12 long, productive years at IBM, Cook had enough stability and felt he needed a new challenge in life. So he left IBM to join Intelligent Electronics in 1994, where he was hired as the COO. But after just a couple of years, Intelligent Electronics' old legal troubles began to get worse, and after a devastating settlement to a class action lawsuit, it was clear the company wouldn't survive. All Cook could do was overseeing Intelligent Electronics businesses being split apart and sold to other companies. The company might have been worthless by now, but Cook was way too valuable in the job market to be left unhired. So immediately, Compaq made an extremely lucrative offer. They offered Cook the vice presidency of the company. Remember, Compaq was the top PC manufacturer in the world at that time, even ahead of IBM and Apple. They desperately needed an inventory genius like Cook to streamline their manufacturing and distribution. It was a perfect job for Cook. It had a huge pay and vice presidentship of the biggest PC manufacturer in the world. What more could he want? But strangely, only after 6 months of joining his biggest promotion yet, Cook will abruptly leave Compaq, that too for a company that was barely functioning, and it was all thanks to this man.
He announced his permanent new position.
I'm pleased to announce today that I'm going to drop the interim title.
In 1997, Steve Jobs rejoined Apple after he was kicked out by his own board. By this time, Apple was struggling quite a bit, and Steve was making big changes to save his company from falling under. He never had a shortage of creativity, but he needed someone that'll bring method to his madness. And Tim Cook, who had made quite a name in the PC industry, was the man who perfected all the manufacturing processes at Apple. The only problem was that it made no sense for Cook to leave his current job at Compaq. As I said, Apple was a struggling company. But one thing Apple had was a founder with a legendary reputation around Silicon Valley. Cook explains this in a speech.
So Apple was in a very different place than it is today, and my employer at the time, Compaq Computer, was the largest personal computer company in the world. Any purely rational consideration of cost and benefits lined up in Compaq's favor, and the people who knew me best advised me to stay at Compaq. But there are times in our lives when the careful consideration of cost and benefits just doesn't seem like the right way to make a decision. In early 1998, I listened to my intuition. not the left side of my brain, or for that matter, even the people who knew me best. But no more than 5 minutes into my initial interview with Steve, I wanted to throw caution and logic to the wind and join Apple. My intuition already knew that joining Apple was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to work for the creative genius and to be on the executive team that could resurrect a great American company.
At this time, Apple was just another PC manufacturer that was now on the verge of extinction. Their most iconic line of products was yet to come, and they certainly wouldn't have come if not for Cook managing things behind the scenes.
Only a few months before I'd accepted the job at Apple, Michael Dell, the founder and CEO of Dell Computer, was publicly asked what he would do to fix Apple. And he responded, "I'd shut it down and give the money back to the shareholders."
But just when Cook joined Apple as a vice president, the game changed. In less than a year, the Apple shifted from a staggering $1 billion loss to turning a healthy profit. Cook quickly climbed the ranks to become executive vice president and eventually chief operating officer, managing worldwide sales and operations at Apple. Cook made significant changes by closing down some of the Apple's factories and warehouses, opting to work with external manufacturers instead. This move not only streamlined operations, but also reduced the time it took to manage inventory from months to just days. Cook's forward-thinking strategies included long-term investments, like securing a stable supply of components such as flash memory since 2005. This foresight ensured a consistent supply of products like the iPod Nano, iPhone, and iPad. By the time competitors like HP were trying to compete with Apple products, they couldn't find a manufacturer to make parts for them because Cook had already secured priority deals for Apple years ahead. HP had to cancel their tablet, which was described as being made from rejected iPad parts. Cook's effective cost control measures, combined with the overall efforts of the company, led to substantial profits. By 2007, Cook was the COO of Apple and, more importantly, a man especially trusted by Steve Jobs. This is quite evident, especially in 2009 when Steve Jobs had to take a health-related leave of absence. He appointed Cook as the interim CEO of Apple. Cook has said that in 2009 he offered a portion of his liver to Jobs as they shared a rare blood type. Cook said that Jobs responded by yelling, "I'll never let you do that. I'll never do that." As Jobs took a third medical leave in 2011, Cook continued to steer the ship, handling the majority of daily tasks while Jobs focused on major decision-making. In August 2011, Steve Jobs stepped down as CEO of Apple, assuming the role of chairman of the board. Tim Cook was officially appointed the new CEO of Apple on August 24, 2011. Tragically, just 6 weeks later, on October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs passed away due to complications from pancreatic cancer. As the world mourned the loss of a genius like Jobs, Cook had to make sure that the legacy of Jobs continued to grow. Remember Compaq, the company that Cook left for Apple? Compaq had vanished, mainly because of the internal problems at the top of the leadership. Cook was determined to save Apple from this fate that befell Compaq, so in 2012, Tim Cook implemented significant alterations to Apple's executive lineup. Following the controversial debut of Apple Maps, Scott Forstall resigned from his role as Senior Vice President of iOS. He transitioned into an advisory role under Cook until his eventual departure from the company in 2013. Simultaneously, John Browett, who held the position of Senior VP of Retail, was dismissed just 6 months into his tenure at Apple. Cook's aim to minimize internal competition among executives faced backlash, especially since Forstall was considered a potential successor to Cook. But Cook's actions eventually proved to be correct when the whole company started moving in a single direction. People couldn't help but wonder what would have Steve done if he was still here. Even Cook thought about that too. But before his passing, Jobs had already advised Cook that he should focus on things that come naturally to him, instead of trying to be the next Steve Jobs of this world. Cook heeded this advice and emphasized that his leadership prioritized people, strategy, and execution, stating, "If you get those three right, the world is a great place." Moving away from Steve Jobs' micromanagement approach, Cook introduced a more hands-off leadership style and fostered a collaborative culture within Apple. Notably, Apple did become less bold and creative in its approach under Cook. The constant innovation magic was diminished. But Cook found an alternative way to grow. He ensured that every customer around the world must have access to Apple products, and that led to huge growth in the long term, especially in the emerging markets like China and India. This approach might seem simple if you don't realize how difficult it is to manage manufacturing logistics around the world. And let's not forget that Apple products come with some service guarantees, and to ensure good customer experience, you need replacement parts, skilled repairmen, and so much more. But Apple never slowed down the growth. Back in September 2021, Apple was already celebrating its 2 billion iPhones sold. Tim Cook managed all that infrastructure flawlessly. The quality never dropped. The brand of Apple was never tarnished in this massive expansion, and it's not a stretch to say Tim Cook is the most successful person in the world when it comes to supply chain operations and distribution. On top of that, Tim Cook has been careful with launching new products, and 2 new physical products he did launch were an absolute success. AirPods became an instant global phenomenon, while Apple Watch was dominating the smartwatch space before the unfortunate patent dispute over a single feature. Despite this setback, Apple will continue to dominate, and the company's unscathed stock price seems to show that the investors have complete faith in Tim Cook's leadership.